We're going to talk about variables here. Do you remember way back in JavaScript last year, when you wanted to make a variable, you would say var, and then you would name the variable, I'm calling it x, and you could initialize it, x equals 5, or maybe you want x to be a string, pizza. It didn't matter. JavaScript liked it either way. You didn't have to specify what kind of variable you were making. It could be anything. Well, in Java, and actually in many languages, you have to say what kind of variable you're making when you make that variable. And in this little video, I'm going to talk about making variables of type string, int, double, and Boolean. And underneath it, I just remind you of when you make a variable, you have to begin a variable with either a letter or an underscore. An underscore is also permitted. Variables can't contain spaces, and the only punctuation that's permitted inside the variable is also an underscore. And of course, you cannot use reserved words to name a variable, like you can't make a variable called if or int for that matter. So underneath, I'm making a variable of type int. Now this is integer, of course. Int is short for integer. The name of the variable is my age, so I'm declaring a variable, and now I'm initializing it. I'm giving it the value of 49, and now I'm going to print it out. System.out.println, and if I hit compile and run, you're going to love this. It's going to be great. And there we go. It is 49. Well, it was already up there. I had run it already. So that's it. Now, if I try to make this a decimal value, called a double, if I compile this guy, you can see that right away it underlined it. Now, I have a different version of BlueJ than you do, perhaps, but it underlines it and it puts a little marker there. And if I mouse over it, it actually tells me what was wrong with this. It says this is an incompatible type. I've perhaps lost possible lossy conversion, but that's phrased a little bit strangely. But it basically means I'm trying to convert a double to an int, and I can lose some precision here. And Java doesn't like to lose precision. So this is not allowed. You've got to, if you say you have an int, you've got to put an int into it, which is of course an integer value. All right. You also need to know about doubles. Now doubles are decimal values. So here I'm declaring a double called my height, 5.5. So I've declared it and initialized it on the same line in this case, and now I'm printing it out. No issues there. It compiles fine, and if I run it, it's going to be very exciting, 5.5. Great. All right. Underneath it, tricky one. Here I have declared another double, my weight. This is all about me. You notice that? My weight, 140. Once again, it compiles. Oh, it didn't like it. I don't know why I have my height here. That should say my weight. Excuse me. All right, so I've declared a variable called my weight, and I'm going to print out my weight. There we go. Now you might say, wait a minute. 140 is not a decimal value. It's an int, and I'm trying to take an int and put it into a double. It allowed it. Well, yes, it allowed it. And the reason it allowed it is because there's no loss of precision here. Java doesn't like to lose precision unless you're explicitly telling it it's okay to lose precision. More on that later. But anyway, it's perfectly fine to take an integer and put it into a double. And you can see what Java did. It just stuck on a 0.0. 140 is the same thing as 140.0 according to Java. I know if you're taking a science class, they make a big fuss about how many zeros you're allowed to have, but in Java, this means the same thing. All right, moving right along. Another way to declare a double, you're not going to see this too often, is to use scientific notation. So here I've made a double that's 1.676 for e, that means times 10 to the third, and I can print out, this is my height in millimeters. Boy, this really is all about me, isn't it? So I'll compile it and I'll run it, and it's going to be very exciting. And there you go. It actually multiplied it by 10 to the third. You can see it moved the decimal over 3 places. You're familiar with scientific notation. That's great. Almost at the end. Now I'm going to make a string type variable. I've made a string. Oh, this has a minor error in it. I wonder if you can figure out what it is. Well, I compile. It says, cannot find this symbol. Joe, well, why can't it find it? Well, I didn't put it in quotes, and perhaps you remember this from JavaScript. You would have this kind of error as well. Actually, I have 2 errors here. I'm glad I did this. String starts with an uppercase S. More on that later. Why does it start with an uppercase S? We'll talk about more of that later. But a string is, of course, something in quotes. If I didn't put it in quotes, it's looking for Joe as a variable. So this should now work. Remember this, when you're declaring a string, which is some letters in quotes, you have to make the S uppercase, and you've got to put the thing in quotes there. All right, I think I said that right. I don't know. All right, so I'll hit compile, give that a run. And there we go. Joe, that's marvelous. Now, just to be clear, I could, of course, make a string, another string. Let's do that. String, I don't know, X equals my name, like that. That's fine. You're saying, but wait a minute, my name's not in quotes. Well, yeah, it's not in quotes, but it's the name of a variable, so that would be permitted. And down here, I could print out X, and that would run fine, and hopefully that makes sense to you. And it still prints out Joe. All right. Last type of variable that you need to know about at this point, and really this is most of the variables you need to know about for the whole course. String is a capital S, more on that later. We already mentioned this. So here I've made a student, and this is a, oh, wait a minute. I want to, assign it true. Boy, this thing is just full of typos, isn't it? Perhaps you remember from last year, we talked about Boolean values. This is a lowercase b, even though it's named after some guy named Boole, but there's a reason why this is lowercase. More on that later. And I've made this Boolean value. Remember, Booleans are things that are true or false. I've made a Boolean called student, and I've assigned it the value true. Notice no quotes around here, and now I can print out student. I'll compile this, and I'll run it, and there we go, true. Now, this is a Boolean value, and actually, I could even do this. Oh, let's be clever. Exclamation point means not. I could print out not student. And what do you think I'm going to get here? False. Or what if I made student false initially, and I printed out not student? Well, it's not getting very exciting here, but you get the idea. I get true. So that's the gist of this. You really need to know about these 4 types of variables at this point. String with a capital S, int, double, and Boolean. And hopefully that's enough to get you started. All right.